yesterday, I sat down with former Mayor Pete to talk about the state of the race and how his strong showing in Iowa could change his game plan moving forward. Right now, do you see this as a two-man race? Mayor Buttigieg, Senator Sanders?
Again, I'll leave it to the pundits to decide how much of a race is. You know, to me, it's about making sure that we're driving our message. This thing started with, I think, something like 25 candidates. And among the candidates who remain, it's our job to get our message out. There are literally too many others for me to be looking sideways or looking over my shoulder.
Then for the Democratic voter who hasn't paid attention until now, what's the difference between you and Senator Sanders?
Well, the difference is that I have an approach that can build a sense of unity that we're going to need, not only in order to win, but in order to govern. We have an extraordinary majority of Democrats, yes, but quite a few independents and a healthy number of Republicans ready to get that done. Why would now, of all times, we go for a my way or the highway politics?
Mayor Pete, you are extraordinarily rational. You have all sorts of answers that make perfect sense. What someone like President Trump, what someone like Senator Sanders do, they know how to let it rip and make a headline. This is the greatest show on earth. How does someone with pragmatic answers break through? That's how people win elections, dominating the media.
The key to defeating Donald Trump is to deny him the ability to change the subject. Putting up some equal but opposite version of him is a recipe for failure, because folks are going to go for the original. We need to do something completely different.
Senator Sanders, equal but opposite? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would certainly say that if you're asking me for why we don't need somebody who has the same kind of sizzle as President Trump, I think we need a different approach. And, you know, everyone's got their approach they're taking to this. But I got to think that if there's one thing that we have learned over the years, it is that if you want to confront a new challenge, you got to approach it with a new solution.
Vice President Joe Biden coming out of Iowa, it looks like, in fourth. And today he's coming out swinging for you. I want to read for you something he said earlier. This is from Vice President Biden. Is he really saying that the Obama-Biden administration was a failure? Pete, just say it out loud. I have great respect for Mayor Pete and his service to the nation, but I do believe it is a risk, to just be straight up with you, for this party to nominate someone who has never held an office higher than a mayor of a town of 100,000 people in Indiana. I believe it's a risk.
Well, let's talk about risk. We absolutely must defeat Donald Trump.
It's not about President Trump. This is Vice President Joe Biden going after you.
Yeah, and I've got to say that I think we've begun to demonstrate on Monday, coming in first in the Iowa caucuses, my ability to put together the coalition that it's going to take to defeat Donald Trump, getting urban, rural, and suburban voters together. And by the way, reaching out not only to fellow Democrats, but independents and even some people leaving the Republican Party. And as to the achievements of the Obama administration, I have enormous regard for those achievements. I mean, if you look at what President Obama was able to do with 2 terms, it's extraordinary. And I had his back during that period. Even as a mayor in Indiana, where it wasn't always easy to step forward and back up the president. But I think the bulk of the credit for the achievements of the Obama administration belong with President Obama.
So that's your response to Vice President Biden?
Well, my response to the vice president is that if the question is about who can win, we just had an election on Monday, and we're going into another one. I'm not focused on the past. I'm focused on this moment. You know, the reason the achievements of the Obama administration mattered is that they met the moment.
There's another mayor running, Mayor Michael Bloomberg. He thinks he's the only one who can defeat Donald Trump. Why should people go with you versus Mayor Bloomberg?
Because I've had the experience of turning around a community that was on the ropes, a low-income community in the heart of the industrial Midwest, the very place where our party has struggled to connect and where this president built his base. I have the experiences of having my own life shaped by politics.
You come from a manufacturing center. You know the truth, that the manufacturing sector is shrinking. Mm-hmm. The president's base, who propelled him into office, were disaffected blue-collar workers. You know those numbers. Their lives aren't better. Yet they are standing with the president because they believe he sees them, he speaks to them, he connects with them. How are you going to connect in that way?
Well, as somebody who actually comes from one of these communities, that's exactly what we're seeking to do. And do it not through division, but through addition. The president is an expert at turning people against one another. I'm focusing on making sure that we can build the unity that it takes, not only to win, but to lead.
What's your approach to South Carolina? You've got an Achilles heel there. No one can win the Democratic primary without winning the support of African American voters. They're in the state of South Carolina, and you haven't won them yet.
Well, we are earning the support
Where?
of voters in South Carolina, black voters in particular in South Carolina, who are rightly skeptical, tired of being taken for granted by politics as usual, and skeptical of any new face who comes along, especially when I've had a matter of months instead of a matter of years or decades to earn trust. So here's what we're doing. First of all, I'm making sure that they hear the story of my own community, not just from me, but from black elected officials who are traveling with me to speak to these stories. But there's something else. No one is feeling the pain of living under this presidency more than Americans of color, in particular black Americans, Latino Americans, also Muslim Americans. No one is feeling that pain more than they are. And so we are 48 hours into the process of proving, not talking, but proving that we can turn out voters and win against our competitors. The next chance to prove it is in New Hampshire, then Nevada, and then South Carolina. But I think by the time we get to South Carolina, I no longer have to defend the idea that a campaign like mine can be competitive in the first place.
Right now, it certainly feels like politics, at least in the Democratic race, is about money, it's about personality. Mayor Bloomberg's got the money, Senator Sanders has the personality. Where does Mayor Pete fit in?
What are you saying about my personality? Look,
Senator Sanders has a much bigger personality. He does.
I don't think that's true.
Okay, what does Mayor Pete look like when he's letting it rip?
Not that different than how I look right now, but that's my personality.
Do you think you have a big personality?
I don't know what big means. I'm a real person, and I think that's what folks are looking for. And each of us, one thing I think I have in common with Senator Sanders, actually, is what you see is exactly what you get. But what you get with me is somebody who can draw folks together, is never going to tell somebody they don't belong in this movement because we don't agree 100% of the time, or write somebody out of this story because it's my way or the highway. I just don't think in a moment where we are frighteningly, dangerously polarized that that's going to be the way to win or the way to govern.
Before we go, a lot of people say progress hasn't happened in this country. We're moving backwards. When you were a 15-year-old boy, did you ever think that one day you would not dream, realistically be the president of the United States? Right now, you're the Democratic frontrunner.
When I was 15, I thought that you could either serve an elected office or you could be out. For that matter, I thought you could either be married or you could be gay, not both. And for all the troubles that we have in this country and the steps back that we've taken in some ways, it's an extraordinary thing to think about the progress that we have made, the progress we can make. And when I'm meeting kids who let me know they realize now they don't have anything to be ashamed of, or people my parents' age who come to me, sometimes in tears, talking about how they just never thought this day could come, it's a reminder that for all the challenges we face as a country, for all the struggles toward justice that this nation has gone through and continues to go through, there are some really good reasons to believe in America and believe in Americans getting things right and moving in the direction of inclusion and decency.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.